Chapter 4. Spiritual Interest, 1850s. Con, ne passion, fit. Hysterical excitement or anger. She threw a conniption fit upon hearing the news. B.Y. 1850, the Searcy County, Arkansas. Census showed there to be 1,250 whites and 27 slaves living in the county. About 1 in 5 were illiterate among the white population. The township of Campbell, Snowball, had the most population of the county with 672 whites and 12 blacks. The community was settled by John Campbell on the banks of Calf Creek in about 1837. The Campbell family was from Tennessee and had come there by way of the Indian Trail from Batesville. John first settled along Cedar Creek with his new wife, Ann Blasingame. 2 years later, other Campbells joined him, and he moved his family to Calf Creek. The story is told that John drove his ox cart to the top of Campbell Mountain, where he looked back and told Ann that the place must be the Devil's Cellar. Some say he gave the name Cellar Creek to the stream in the valley. While others moved into the area, no real town existed prior to the late 1800s, though a post office called Calf Creek was established in the area in 1857. Prior to the Campbell family, native Indians had once lived under a rock shelter, later called Cooper's Bluff. The site has a prehistoric panel of pictographs under its overhang. It is estimated to have been painted around A.D. 1500. White traders and hunters only passed through the valley after the Indians were gone in the late 1820s. The bottom land, where Calf Creek and Richland Creek flowed into the Buffalo River, was some of the best land in the county. Corn, oats, wheat, cotton, cane, and tobacco grew well in the deep bottom soil. John Campbell was a farmer and built a water-powered grist mill on Upper Calf Creek. He taught school and held elected offices in his lifetime. He served as a first lieutenant in the Arkansas Confederate Army during the Civil War. Benjamin Taylor was another early settler, and in later years he built a steam-powered grist mill at Calf Creek. In 1879, the boiler ruptured, and the explosion killed 4 men who worked at the mill. He rebuilt the mill and started the area's first cotton gin. The Campbells and Taylors became founding names of those who had first settled in western Searcy County. Over in the Red River Valley was the town of Wiley's Cove, where Leslie is today. In 1850, there were 560 whites and 4 blacks living there. Wiley's Cove became the best valley for growing wheat for miles around. Flour was superior to cornmeal, and every cook wanted some of the white powder to bake with. The small grain was laborious to grow, harvest, and separate it for the mill, but a loaf, cake, or a biscuit was much tastier than cornbread. By the year of 1850, there were 6 school teachers and about 120 students in Searcy County. 3 church buildings stood, 2 Methodist and 1 Baptist, which could hold about 50 people. The church buildings were given a value of $50 each. One record prior to the Civil War said that there were 9 preachers, of whom 6 were Baptist of some kind, living in the county. A Methodist collection of the time period says that the first religious services were held in rude cabins among plain people and outdoors when the weather permitted. Often when a schoolhouse was built, it served as a church house as well. As wealth and population increased, a small rude building was built as a church or meeting house. Preachers and teachers were in short supply, considering how great the need was for educational and religious training. In 1859, as the decade was closing, something strange appeared in the skies at night that people had never witnessed. From August 28th through September 2nd, the northern lights appeared to people living as far south as Colombia. The solar storm was the greatest ever on record and knocked out telegraph communications. The event must have brought panic to many. Many years later, the auroras once again became visible, and a great-grandson of Alec, William Earl Harness, saw them on Bear Creek and was terrified by the sight. Coronal mass ejections, CMEs, are large expulsions of plasma and magnetic field from the sun's corona. On the scale of the CME experienced in 1859, if it happened today, the shutdown would be enormous. It would fry our electric power systems and electronic devices. While it mostly affected only the telegraph in America, today few things would work due to the electronics that drive so many communication systems and machinery. People used to regard visible comets as harbingers of war and bad times. There seems to have been a great comet, which became readily visible across the nation in 1858. The winter weather of 1856-1857, when records were kept along the eastern seaboard, was one of the most severe on record. Even the Plains Indians recorded winter counts of the severity. Perhaps the combination of unusual manifestations in the heavens and unusual weather created the conditions that lead to a greater spiritual interest about God. Some called the period that began in 1857 the Third Great Awakening. Evangelist Charles G. Finney wrote of that revival. This winter of 1857-58 will be remembered as the time when a great revival prevailed. It swept across the land with such power that at the time it was estimated that not less than 50,000 conversions occurred weekly. Significant names of spiritual leaders during that era include D.L. Moody, Ira D. Sankey, William Booth, Charles Spurgeon, and Hudson Taylor. Due to the shortage of preachers in rural areas of the Ozark Hills and the widely scattered populations, having a preacher or someone who could teach the Bible was special. Before the Civil War, and for years to follow, those living on Upper Bear Creek had neither a school nor church. The Methodists, Baptists, and Cumberland Presbyterians worked to establish circuit-riding preachers in the scattered settlement, but the need was far greater than the supply. It was many years before small communities had a schoolhouse or a meeting house for educating those who desired to learn and be taught the Bible. Near where my granddaughter Mia Shirley goes to see her father in Searcy, Arkansas, is a historic site and building named the Smyrna Methodist Church. Constructed from wood, the building was built in 1854 and is the oldest documented church in Arkansas. The origin and history are told as follows. The Smyrna Methodist Church was built by Methodists who swarmed left, a Union church located at Center Hill that, according to folklore, was home to numerous religious groups. After a speaker inferred that the Methodists weren't likely to get into heaven, the congregation decided to construct their own church home at Smyrna, where they worshiped until the 1970s when the church closed, and remaining members moved to Grace United Methodist Church in Searcy. Today, a display case at St. Paul United Methodist Church in Searcy houses artifacts and mementos from the old Smyrna Methodist Church. Restorations to the 164-year-old church are ongoing, and the building is still available for weddings. The Methodist movement began with the teachings of John Wesley and his brother Charles Wesley, coming out of the 18th century Church of England. Those men, along with George Whitefield, sparked a revival in many communities where they preached. Early Methodists drew upon all levels of society, but their openness to common working-class people and inclusion of slaves made them grow into the largest church denomination in America in the 1800s. It was a goal to establish a church in every county in America, which was accomplished and never repeated by any other denomination. The following is an account written by Dr. Andrew Hunter, 1813–1902, about an Arkansas Methodist in the 1800s. The names of Burwell Lee and Thomas Bertholf appear on the roll of the Missouri Conference for 1834. Bertholf's ministry was altogether in the Indian country. By marriage, he was connected with the Cherokees. In 1836, when I first knew him, he was spare-made, light hair, inclined to be curly, light blue eyes, and in social circles a most pleasant and companionable man. He preached acceptably and was one of the weeping prophets. When I last knew him, his home was on the Illinois Creek in the Cherokee Nations, near the present town of Tahlequah. On returning from Washington County, Arkansas, in the early days of 1837, I was belated and lost my way, but at last reached the home of young Wolf, a good brother of the Cherokee Nation and a faithful local preacher. At his house that night, I met Bro Bertholf. He was filling an appointment at Bro young Wolf's that night, and I came on them a little while before he closed his sermon. He was preaching about the well of living water springing up unto everlasting life. He was talking in a fine, mellow strain, and as usual, he was crying, and the rest were enjoying it to the full. It was a regular old-fashioned Methodist meeting, except Bro Bertholf. I have not met any of that company since, but when God makes up his jewels, they will be of them, for they are worthy. In the fall of 1837, he accompanied Brother Harold to the last quarterly meeting in the Choctaw Nation, and we journeyed from there to the conference at Little Rock together, where we parted to meet again in the future. My company has gone before. Young Wolf was converted in the old nation, came west as a local preacher, and was a great stay and support to the first missionaries in the West. He interpreted the first sermon I attempted to preach to the Cherokees. He was a large man, not tall, but wide around. My recollection is that his weight was about 300. He spoke English very well, and in his own tongue was said to be a good speaker and an able preacher. Long since he has been gathered to his fathers. Doubtless his children and his grandchildren remain to this day. The family of Bro Bertholf remains to this day of the Cherokee Nation. The time and scenes of long ago are brought to my remembrance by these sketches. Thank God, we shall not be strangers in the next world. Our friends are waiting and watching at the gates, ready to welcome us to the Master's joy. Burwell Lee's name appears first on the roll in 1834. He taught school at Adair's. He was then a young man, and this was his last appointment in the nation. He did valuable work among whites, mostly as presiding elder. He traveled a district that embraced Helena on the Mississippi River and Fayetteville in the west, with various appointments between. With the exception of a few years, he gave a long life to the itineracy in Arkansas. He always preached well. He had the courage of a Christian minister and never compromised that character. In the social circle, he was always pleasant and genial. The last years of his life, he was a superannuate, his home being at Batesville, where he had lived for many years. I know nothing of the particulars of his death, which happened a few years since. Doubtless he died as he lived, trusting in his Savior. In the great day, many a brother in red as well as white will greet him where congregations do not break up and Sabbaths do not end. All over North Arkansas, Burwell Lee is remembered by the old Methodists with great affection. From Sketches by Andrew Hunter. Adair's is the present town of Adair, Oklahoma. Named after two Cherokee brothers, William Penn Adair, a politician and jurist, and Dr. Walter Thompson Adair. In the 1880s, a Cherokee school was started there. Reflection. Throughout history, there have been times of spiritual decay and then spiritual awakening. At times, perception of events has caused folks to evaluate their soul. When strange phenomena happened in nature, it brought fear and wonderment if God was giving them a harbinger of His judgment or His coming. In those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Matthew 24:29.